It is Delilah Cordova here, and I am here today with a spectacular author. And then her story is going to blow you guys away. I can't wait to get into it. But like I said, her name is C. Marshall Turner, and her book is A Cajun Journey. And I'm going to let her explain to you about the book and about how it came to be and give us all those good details. Go ahead.
Hi, Delilah. Thank you, everyone at home. My name is C. Marshall Turner, at least that's my pen name. I have written A Cajun Journey. It seeks to entertain the reader, because it is fiction, but to also give information to people about the Cajun culture in Louisiana, our nation's military, and the United States Marine Corps. I'm a retired Marine, and it was important to get part of that story out.
Yeah. So you want to tell them about the book?
I will tell them about the book. I'd be happy to. The book starts with a small family who seeks to leave an abusive situation, and they find themselves trudging through the swamps of Louisiana until they find a safe place. Now, on the way to the safe place, they are given a helping hand by a gentleman from North Carolina. North Carolina does make its way into the book. As it turns out, he is also running away from an abusive situation, although it's different, but still significant.
Right.
He did serve in the Marines in North Korea. That's an important part of the story because it helps to build his character.
Mm-hmm.
This family experiences disappointment. They experience tragedy, but they also experience moments of elation. They experience periods where they finally find themselves individually and collectively as a family. And it demonstrates resilience, but it also, once again, exposes Louisiana Cajun culture to the reader.
And that's, part of the biggest thing that, we've discovered through our marketing is how the Cajun culture is, like, kind of dying out. You want to tell them more about how we came to be? Because when you came and pitched this book to me, I was immediately on board, remember?
I do remember. You were immediately on board.
So tell them about how that came to be with marketing and how you were able to reach the Cajun culture and the younger Cajuns at that.
I will. Thank you. The backstory about Cajun culture, the Cajuns were expelled from the Nova Scotia, present-day Nova Scotia, back in 1750. A lot of them ended up in South Louisiana. Mm-hmm. They had their own enclave. For the most part, they were left alone, so they were able to preserve their culture and preserve their language. But in recent years, really beginning in the 20th century, around 1920, mm-hmm. a lot of that began to fade away for a variety of reasons.
Right.
In today's environment, technology has contributed to the culture and especially the language going away. So the marketing came in, and Delilah had this brilliant idea to have Cajun French cards. Now, I should warn you that the book does have some Cajun French interwoven into the story. Not a lot. I defined the word or the phrase in the same paragraph that it's being used, but it's there. And so the Cajun cards were meant to do two things. Number one, get a higher search engine optimization mm-hmm. on our social media. And number two, be a reference for those who read the book and who wanted to learn more about Cajun. Well, what was amazing were the number of people, particularly as you said, Delilah,
right.
the young Cajuns, who connected with that because they wanted to be reintroduced to their language. They wanted to try and preserve their language more. They wanted to speak to their grandparents
right.
in French because
right.
there's still some older generations that don't speak English,
right.
which is really quite amazing. But it has certainly helped with our marketing campaign.
Right. The response to the Cajun cards was crazy. You would never thought that so many people were, trying to get back involved in that culture. It was also crazy to me, as you explained to me before, was about how the Acadians came from Canada to here. You want to tell them about that? Because, it kind of goes with a little bit backstory.
It's called Le Grand Arrangement, to put it in as close a French accent that I can. But the French had settled into Canada, again, the northern area called Nova Scotia, back in the 1650s. Mm-hmm. And they had an on-again, off-again relationship with the British, because the British had settled in the New England area. And so there were some fishing rights and trades with the Native American population. So there was just, again, an on-again, off-again. And at one point, they would be French subjects, and they would be loyal to the French, but they wouldn't take up arms against the native Canadians, mm-hmm. the native population, or the British. And then the British came in and took over the land, and so then they became British subjects under the agreement that they would preserve their language, stay Catholic, and again, not take up arms against the French or their native inhabitants. Because a lot of them had actually married into those native communities.
Right.
So they were family as well as neighbors. Well, at one point, the British were tired of it, and so they literally called them to a big meeting, locked them in the church, had ships, British ships showed up, and they forcibly put them on the ships. They weren't allowed to go back to collect their families, to collect their belongings, nothing. They were forced on the ship and sent. Some were sent to South Carolina.
Wow.
Some were sent to Georgia. Some were actually brought back to France. But because of the French population in New Orleans, a lot of them had decided to go to Louisiana, and that's how they ended up in Louisiana.
Right. Wow.
Over time.
Could you imagine that? I mean, that happens today. It's happening now. But to have to be forced, to leave where you're from and to go somewhere, I remember you told me it was like they moved them there because it was the most hell.
That's
or
right.
Something like that.
That's right. The British at one point said we should take them to Louisiana because coming from Nova Scotia, where it snows 6 to 8 months out of the year, where the climate isn't as harsh except for the snow, we'll take them to where they won't be able to survive because they didn't think they would have the skill set to adapt to that climate because it's such an opposite climate. The heat, the humidity, subtropical, mosquitoes carrying diseases. So that's one reason why they brought them there as well.
But they proved them wrong.
But they proved them wrong. They sure did. The adaptability of the Cajuns is significant. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. Say that again.
It's amazing that they did survive because it was quite the change. The adaptability of the Cajuns is really quite significant and remarkable.
Wow. It is. I think you portray that well in this book, because I did get to read some of it. Well, I got to read the first manuscript because I had to get to know the characters so I can be able to market more better. But can you want to tell them how this book went? Remember when you first came in, the size of the book?
Yes. Yes, the first draft of the manuscript, because we know that when you write, you're not just writing. Most of writing is really editing. But the first draft was going to produce a 700-page book. And my publisher said no. She was not going to publish a 700-page book. She recommended that I cut it back. But I felt like there was too much rich material.
Right.
I didn't want to cut it back. So I basically kind of disentangled it, if you will, and came up with 4 different stories. So now I have a book series instead of just one book. But I recognize that it was large. It did continue with the Cajun and the military themes, and now it's just about between 250 and 300 pages, rather than 7 or more hundred.
It's okay. You can keep writing. So when those 700 pages that this originally was, what is the plan for the rest of the book that didn't get into this book?
Well, the second book, I've already finished the first draft of it, and I'm pleased to announce that I've kept that within 300 pages. And the editing will bring it down a bit. It'll beef up some areas and bring it down. But right at this point, I have a 4-book series from that 700 initial manuscript.
Wow. So then, how do you feel now that you've broken your book down into many parts? Do you feel like more relaxed about it? Because there's probably less work with it being less than 700 pages, right?
Well, from the writing perspective, not necessarily from the editing perspective, but from the marketing perspective, there will be more, I don't want to say work, but there will be more tasks to accomplish.
Right, because each book would need its own
market. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, not its own market, just its own place, you
right.
know?
Right.
But with this book, for me, if I were writing a book and I had written 700 pages, I think I would be the type of person to be like, no, we're publishing 700 pages.
Well,
I would fight tooth and nail on that.
I think every American writer strives to write the greatest American novel.
Right.
And I would be lying if I didn't say that I was trying to do that, but more the greatest Cajun novel.
Yeah.
But then when I looked at it from a marketing perspective, because why write the greatest Cajun or American novel if you can't market it and sell it? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Especially with the purposes of entertaining the readers and then educating them on Cajun culture, on the United States Marine Corps, on our military history as a nation.
Right.
And when I started thinking of it from a business perspective, I realized that a book series actually had more sustainability than a single huge book.
Right.
I mean, 700 pages, War and Peace is 1,000. I was encroaching on that size.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because you don't want to write a Bible.
No.
Who all has finished the Bible?
Right.
So being able to just, you'll be able to make money based off of each separate one. Because some people get the second one before they get the first one. They have to read the first one.
And they're not. The books are somewhat mutually exclusive. You can read the first one
The
and then
meeting has ended because it had only one participant for the last 30 minutes.
and then read this. So you can read the first one and you can read the second one, and you're not going to feel like you've missed anything.
Right.
Because they're following now two different families, and then in the third one the families are united to a degree,
Right.
and then in the fourth one we have a new generation.
Right. So then you want to tell them about, because not only did this book help the younger Cajun community, but it also helped for the veterans.
Right. There are some proceeds that will go to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and that will also go to Marion Military Institute, those who have not become veterans yet, because they're still in the early phases of their military education. But it does shine a light, and this one in particular shines a light on what they call the Forgotten War, which is the Korean War. The Korean War was a very short war in the 1950s, if any war can be considered short, because a day of war is a long, long time. But this one was 3 years as opposed to the current campaign that we have, which was 10 years.
Right.
It does, again, it kind of puts our nation's military in a different perspective with respect to the character and how it's developed that character. But I will say that it's a very well researched book. I wanted to make sure that all the details were accurate and correct. I reached over through the military history archives at Texas A&M University,
Right.
and found operations or situation reports documents on real Marine Corps units that actually served in the area that's in the book. So I used those units. I used some of those names because, of course, I have to be careful with that.
Right.
But I certainly used the scenario that was going on because it was considered unclassified information, and I could use it now. It's part of our national history.
Yeah. So then, another thing that you should we should bring up, is how you are a female Marine.
And I hear there's not a lot of us.
There's not, and like I couldn't do it. I really couldn't. I was Army, but a Marine, you guys are like, whew.
We're different.
Very different. A little scary.
That's how it's intended.
So, were you able to bring any of that experience into your book as well?
I did, actually. There's a boot camp scene, and some of my experience is in the boot camp scene, because I didn't know, actually, until I started writing this book and asked other veterans who were from other services about their experience with the yellow footprints, and they were like, yellow footprints, what are you talking about? Well, the Marine Corps has, when you get off the bus on Parris Island, I imagine San Diego as well, but I know for a fact from first-hand experience, Parris Island, there are yellow footprints. When you come off the bus, you have to step into a pair of yellow footprints that are painted on the ground. And that is the beginning of the realization that I have really gotten myself into this, and there is no turning back. And that is one of the chapters in the book, the yellow footprints.
I had that same situation happen to me, but it wasn't in yellow footprints. It was in the phone booth when I called my mother.
Oh, you got to call your mother.
You got to call your mother.
We got to write in "Dear Mom" and then sign our names on a pre-printed postcard that said we arrived safely.
I called and I bawled. I was bawling.
They might call today. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Like, you got to call your, sweet.
It was nice. You got to call home.
So how long were you away before you got to call home?
Well, I started in October, and we didn't graduate till January, so they did give us a Christmas gift, which was literally a 5-minute conversation with our families on Christmas Day. Unfortunately, my family didn't take it seriously when I said I literally have 5 minutes, and they were passing the phone and putting it down and let's call your Nana. No, your Aunt Pat wants to speak with you. And no, y'all, I really only have 5 minutes. And then my cousin got on the line because she was like, oh, your mother went to find my mother. And all of a sudden the drill instructor was yelling in her ear and my ear too, you're done, get off the phone. And then pushed the plunger down because I had hit over 5 minutes. And that was Christmas.
How did your family feel about you becoming a Marine?
Well, again, I am writing under the pen name or the pseudonym of C. Marshall Turner, and I selected that name to pay a tribute to my father's family and its military legacy. They were elated. They didn't really think that the Marine Corps was the right service for me because it was hard and they didn't know women could go in the Marine Corps, but I knew it was the right service for me, and they trusted my judgment on that. My mother's family, who has no military legacy, my mother was a first-generation American, so they had zero legacy in the military. They were really concerned because one of the residents of their hometown in Massachusetts died in Marine Corps Parris Island boot camp.
Oh, wow.
Through just a tragic incident. And they were very concerned. But I was like, well, you can worry, that's fine. Send me letters and care packages, or maybe not care packages, but certainly letters.
Right.
And then once I graduated boot camp, they felt better about it until I went on deployments, and that's just everybody's story.
Right. And how were they feeling when you decided to tell them about your book and, you know, what you were going on with that?
Well, of course, they all want to know if there's a character named after them. And no, there isn't. But they're excited about it. They're glad to see that I'm taking my English literature education and my storytelling skills, which was another legacy out of my dad's family, to tell the story, particularly around the Cajuns and the military history of our nation.
Yeah.
They were very excited.
I bet they were. I would be. I'd be like, oh my God, my baby. She was a Marine, now she's an author.
That's very similar to my mother's reaction.
Yeah.
And then my husband, of course, is also a veteran from his country. He actually is from Canada.
Oh, yeah.
And he's been he's the one who pushed me for 10 years to write this book.
Right.
And he's been extremely supportive. He's helped me edit the book. He's my first test reader always, and he's my business partner with the book as well. He's been, and our son, teenage son, characteristic honesty. If you don't want to know, don't ask a teenage boy.
Oh.
But he's been very supportive as well and encouraging.
Hashtag honest teenagers. So I'm gonna get into a few more questions with you. But my first question out of our list that we usually do is, does writing energize or exhaust you?
Well, that depends. If I'm writing fiction, I feel energized. I'm telling the stories of my own personal experiences. I'm telling the stories that people have shared with me over the years, to include my father's. I can be creative, I can be imaginative, I can research topics that I want to research. But if I'm writing nonfiction, and I don't mean like a memoir, but I mean like technical writing, like at work writing, in corporate America writing, that is exhausting to me, because now I have to look up policy and procedure and reconcile it with whatever the topic is,
right,
and write it in a very constrained way, which I find exhausting.
Right. I think that I would find that exhausting as well. Writing in any format is exhausting for me. I am not the best. I'm a marketer, but I am not the best copywriter or author. So, what are common traps for aspiring writers?
Well, I would say if you're an aspiring writer, the first thing that you should do is to not try to write the perfect draft.
Right.
A lot of writers sit down and they get intimidated because they feel like they have to be perfect right as soon as their pencil hits the page.
Right.
And it's just not true. When I was in high school, I had a wonderful high school English teacher, and she taught us about the 4 personalities of writing. The first one is the mad woman or the mad man, which is just put everything on the page. Grammar doesn't matter, spelling doesn't matter, the ideas don't need to flow linearly, just put it on the page. And then the second personality is the architect. That's when you do big movements. take out this chapter, these paragraphs need to go, I need to delete all of that half of the book or preserve it for another book. That's your architect. It's
Right.
very similar to drawing plans for a building.
Right.
And then you have your carpenter comes in. Your carpenter is not going to change your rooms around within the building, but he's going to say things like, well, you might want the sink under the kitchen window rather than over by where the refrigerator might want to be. You might want your island to be this long or that long. So it's more about the details, but still big details. So from a writer's perspective, a lot of it is restructuring a sentence, maybe restructuring a paragraph. And then the fourth personality is the judge. The judge is word choice. The judge is, do I put a comma here, or is that going to make a comma splice? The judge is about capitalization. It's the really fine details. And again, a lot of people try to start right through the judge and bypass the other three personalities, and that's where they become intimidated and will potentially give up. So if I had to give any tips to aspiring writers, I would say work your way through all four personalities of a writer.
Wow. I never thought about it like that. That is a wonderful anthology because it takes you through the actual process. Probably the actual, kind of like the stages of mourning. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, the stages of writing, but the stages of mourning.
Right.
But yeah, if you go straight through to the the last step and you miss all the other steps, it's just not going to work out well.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to ask you about a pseudonym.
The pseudonym, yes, I've already alluded to it. C. Marshall Turner is a pseudonym that I selected back when I first started writing. I was under the false impression that male authors sold more books than female authors, especially when there's a military theme.
Right.
When I decided to write under a pseudonym for that reason, I wanted to make sure it was meaningful. And that's when I selected, as I mentioned earlier, the C. Marshall Turner, because it does pay tribute to my father's family and its military legacy.
Right.
Well, I've since come to learn from not only from my marketing manager, but just hearing others, particularly other female veterans, that we have a story and we shouldn't have to hide behind another name. And I agreed with that, which is why I'm doing this interview, because the book hasn't even been published yet, but I'm willing to do the interview to recognize that Meredith Brown, which is my real name, is really C. Marshall Turner, or C. Marshall Turner is really Meredith Brown, whichever perspective you want to use. But I have my own story, and I need to get it out.
Right.
And that's what I'm doing. But I still like using C. Marshall Turner to pay tribute to my father's family.
Right. It's wonderful. And you know what? I'm so happy you decided to do it. I've been like the whole, how many months we've been working together? About 10 months we've been working on this. And I've been like, please just use your name. Listen, like, what's wrong with being a female writer? You're a flippant female Marine writer. At that, like, you're just too awesome to be behind, like
to hide behind.
Right. Yeah. Right. And you wrote the book. Men are men. This is 2018. You know what I'm saying? And it's like a lot of females. They still. It's actually, I feel like it's kind of an epidemic, if that's the word to say for it, because a lot of females feel like they can't write books that males write and then write it as, what I mean, they do it under pseudonym with the same thought process. Right. But it's not the reason. You know what I mean? It's not the season for that anymore. Right. And I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you.
I appreciate it.
Because the world needs to know that it was you.
It did take some intellectual and some emotional processing.
Right.
Before I accepted the fact that, yes, this is my story. This is my work.
Right. And then when Oprah comes by, she's going to be like, we're going to take that Marine right there, and we're going to put her in the book club.
Let's hope. That'd be wonderful. I'm not picky. I'll take Ellen DeGeneres, too. She's also from Louisiana.
Yeah? Oh,
she is.
Now we know who we're sending a press release to. So, yeah. The next question I'm going to ask you is, do you try more to be original or to deliver to readers what they want?
Well, that's a good question, and it is fiction, and this is my first book, but I have published articles in the past. Frankly, I go original, and this is why. As I was a reader, and I'm a reader first. I was a reader long before I became a writer. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I want sometimes when I go in the bookstore when I'm reading a book. depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll select a book because I know the author and I appreciated their work in the past. But I think original works, I think readers want to be surprised on occasion.
Right.
And if you're going to give them what they want, it becomes predictable. And if it becomes predictable, then it becomes boring. And nobody wants to invest time and energy in reading a book when it's just going to be boring.
Right.
So I prefer original work.
Nobody wants to read a boring book.
A boring, predictable book.
Right.
We do enough of that in school. Why should we do it in our own time?
For real. Like, yeah. I've always been a reader first because I'm not a writer yet. Or not. But the thing is, the book has to be original for me. Because, if you don't get that reader within the first, chapter, or
Right.
if it starts really slow, then it's just completely lose interest.
Right. That's right.
So if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
My younger writing self. If I could tell, now mind you, my younger writing self is less than 2 years old, but if I could tell my younger writing self to pay attention to anything in particular, it would definitely be learn marketing, improve networking. Learn marketing in that it was a stroke of genius that I found you, Delilah, and marketing. But it's important for me, it's important to me to be the client who understands what you're trying to teach me, because oftentimes we've had those difficult conversations where I've asked you the same question 3 times in the same conversation because I just didn't understand. And I think we could have had a smoother marketing transition in many ways if I had been better educated on what marketing is in social media. And you've been very patient, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But it did take a leap on my part, my own research. I don't understand what funnel is and Facebook and Instagram. It was a learning experience that I wish I'd had years ago.
Right.
And the best marketing is word of mouth, which is what leverages networking.
Right.
In my youth, I always felt like my work spoke for itself.
Right.
Well, I've come to learn that that's not the case either. It'll speak for itself, but if nobody knows about it, then it's not going to speak at all. And that's where networking comes in.
Right. And I got to mention here though, I taught her how to do Instagram. And now she's doing her own Instagram with my, assistance, or I monitor what's going on. But you have become the best Instagrammer ever.
Oh, thank you.
When you post, people, you get at least, 70, 80, probably 100 within a week, right? Likes. And then you get tons of comments on it. So you're doing an excellent job. You want to give anybody any advice for Instagram?
Well, when you and I talked about Instagram, one of the things you cautioned me of is you have to pick a theme.
Right.
Some people just do sunsets. Some people just do food. And I would go through those pages but it's just food. Oh my God, what am I going to pick? Why landed on Louisiana? Now, that's a pretty broad theme, but since it is diverse, it does capture quite a bit of a large audience, because there's food, there's wildlife, there are sunsets over the swamp, there are old, dilapidated houses and buildings.
Right.
There are unique things. We toured a rice company and took a picture of a pencil sharpener and posted that. An old rusty pencil sharpener still mounted against the wall, posted that. I think that got like 200 or 300 likes alone because it brought back memories for people.
Right.
The crawfish season, the crawfish meals, and a lot of people like that too. So I think my theme has been Louisiana, and it's been very successful. You have to pick a theme and stick with it.
Right. So you guys need any help with Instagram, gotta hit up Meredith. But you want to go ahead and tell them what your Instagram handle is, so I can find you?
It's C. Marshall Turner.
C. Marshall Turner on Instagram.
On Instagram.
Yeah. All right. And then, so my next question is, what does literary success look like to you?
Literary success. Well, that's a great question. To me, literary success is when a fan approaches me for whatever reason and says, I made a trip to Louisiana because I loved your book. Or I read more about the Marine Corps and the Korean War because I loved your book. That to me is literary success. because it means that the reader was really brought into the story. They felt the characters, they felt the experiences that the characters are feeling, and it inspired them to travel or to read other works.
Right. That's great. That's whenever you can inspire or get people to do something that they want to do. That has to be because even with my author interviews and such, when they come back to me like, oh, thanks to you, I did my first interview with you. Now I'm doing more interviews, and thank you so much. And now everything's like working well, and it feels so good.
Right.
So I can imagine like when you have your book, and then the reader comes back and is like, you're gonna be like.
Yes, I learned Cajun French because of your book. Yay, that's awesome.
So, I really want to talk about this question because this is a really good question. What kind of research did you do, and how long did you spend researching before beginning your book?
Right.
Because you have so much historical data in this book.
Right.
And I think that it's really important for authors to portray events. Like, you don't want to be writing about a hospital scene and then, have some other weird stuff come up because you don't know what the scalpel or whatever this is called and how it actually works, right?
Right. No, that's a great question. Well, I didn't do any of the research prior to writing the book because I had to start writing the book before I knew what the story was going to be. But then when I came across the idea of, I should include the Sugarcane Festival and the Frog Festival, which are really big festivals in Louisiana. I know most people are familiar with Mardi Gras, which is important too, but my story is set a little farther west, and I wanted something a little more unique. I had to do research. We actually attended the Sugarcane Festival just to get a feel for the environment and the atmosphere. It was wonderful to learn that they still actually go out there and bless the sugarcane fields.
That's interesting.
Right. So I thought that was wonderful. But I wouldn't have known that had I not done the research.
Right.
I wouldn't have known that the USS Bayfield carried the 5th Marine Regiments across the Pacific to Korea during the Korean War, unless I had done the research.
Right.
And that specific research, I think I mentioned earlier, was done when I was online looking through. Texas A&M has a wonderful military history program, and they have a lot of situation reports and other operational reports that are archived and declassified and are available to the public. So I went through, I couldn't tell you how many of those reports. To answer the how long question, I mean, we still periodically do research. A book that I read a couple years ago on horse racing came in handy because I do have a little bit of Louisiana horse racing.
Right.
And I was going through my bookshelves. Oh, where's that book? And I found it. It's probably 6 months or more just in research. And it's not all understanding that here's my list of questions.
Right.
But I have an idea, does this jockey uniform make sense? Do quarter horses, are they really race horses? And I've come to learn that yes, they are.
Wow.
So, and that all came through research. So I learned a lot just in writing this book through my own research.
So I didn't even know that. You have to do your research.
You have to do your research.
So yeah, you know what is really unique about this book is the characters.
The characters.
The characters
They're unique.
Oh gosh, they're unique. And how I don't know how you came with the storyline or how it came about, but how every character is just a little bit so different. So how did you select the names of your characters?
The names. Well, now that's a really good question too, because that also required research. So on the surface of it, they're mostly French names, with the exception of characters who aren't in Louisiana.
Right.
And the French names were important to me to get those right. So I literally pulled out the Tribe Parish phone book covering Lafourche, Terrebonne, and Assumption parishes. And I was flipping through the phone book that we had stowed away in some back closet in the house. And I was flipping through, and then I realized, but my story is actually taking place in St. Mary in Iberia Parish. So let me look at those phone books, because the different enclaves of the Cajuns went to different parts of the state. Some went to the more swampy bayou areas and got into seafood, and some went to the plains of Louisiana and grew rice and sugarcane.
Right.
So the names are different based on the families. Once I learned that, then I started thinking, what's a good name? And the main character in this book, or one of the main characters, is Evangeline. And Evangeline was important because of Longfellow's poem, Evangeline, which talks about the expulsion of the Canadians from Canada. There's even a state park named Evangeline in the region in which the book is set. They call her Evie for short to modernize the name a bit.
Right.
But the name Evangeline, and I think it came to me because I read it when I was in LSU studying English literature, and it just popped in my head, and I said, this character needs to be Evangeline. And then the male character, James, frankly, he was named after my uncle, because the personality started reminding me of my uncle in some ways, so I decided to name him James.
Wow. So, is there anybody else in the book that you want to point out and say, no, that is you?
Well, Pierre is another character who's really a wonderful character. And Pierre is a common name, actually, in Louisiana. Not as common as it used to be, but it is fairly common.
Right.
And it was important to me to name this particular boy, he's a young boy, Pierre, because he began to remind me of my best friend's brother, who died an untimely and tragic death.
Oh, wow.
And so as a tribute to our friendship, for whatever reason, it came to me to name him Pierre, and we had a conversation about it, and I asked permission, and she started crying and said that would be wonderful. And so there's Pierre.
Oh, so you got to relive him in the book, right?
To a degree, yeah, to a degree.
That's cute. So then there was another, like, how did your characters come up, right? Like a guy in a bayou, like coming down the river, like where did he come from? Like, just came to your,
it's hard to explain. Yeah, it really is hard to explain. I mean, I don't know how other authors do it, but as I'm writing, I can literally see the figures in front of my face. And there was, at the point when Evie and Josephine, her mother, felt like they could go no farther, they encountered a challenge, and they'd already been walking for 4 days. I decided, okay, God needs to give them a little grace.
Right.
And bring him a helping hand. And, well, they're in the middle of the swamp. Who's going to be their helping hand? It's not like they can hitchhike.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who use what we call pirogues, which is a particular type of boat that works really well in the swamps because it's a flat bottom boat. So my mind, I just had this vision of a man coming by in his pirogue, and he looks over and he was like, what are they doing out here?
Yeah.
And so he offers them some assistance.
But he also, became more to them.
He did become more to them.
Yeah.
It was almost, they were running away from a situation, he was running away from a situation, and they found the answers that they were looking for, at least the kind of life that they were looking for with each other.
Right.
And then it's a matter of telling that story.
So then, does the book get into any, like, romantic type?
A little.
Like
Nothing exotic. It is a clean, well, except for some language in the Marine Corps scenes, it's a clean book otherwise. But it tests their faith too, because they're Catholic.
Right.
And so people have to behave until they don't have to behave anymore.
There's a time when you don't have to behave
There's a time when you don't have to behave anymore. And they encountered that opportunity. So there is a bit of romance. At first it's a natural romance, but they have to wait.
Right.
Or they have to wait to see what will happen, because Josephine is married. In the Catholic Church, divorce used to mean, at this era, and this is written in the late 40s to the early 60s, meant automatic excommunication.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't want that.
Right.
She loved her God and her faith more than she did her husband.
Right.
So she did not want to divorce and be excommunicated. And James, the helping hand, the gentleman who lent her and her daughter assistance, understood that. And so he was patient.
That's
but
good.
Still in love.
Aw. That's good, though, that there was some romance in here. There's a lot in here. There's history, there's romance, there's a few different storylines.
Cajun
language, like, whew.
Cajun culture.
Yeah, it's a lot. You would never think that all that is in here. You know what I mean?
But
So-
it's not, I don't think it's all forced, though. I think it flows pretty well, but then I'm the author. So everybody's going to have to buy the book and let me know. Do you think it flows well, or do you think it's too full of different themes?
Exactly. So what's one thing that you would give up to become a better writer?
To become a better writer. I have just the thing. I would give up my job in corporate America to become a better writer. And I mean that seriously. To write well, you have to write persistently every day. And then you have to walk away for a bit and come back and review it to see if it continues to make sense. And that takes time.
Right.
And when you're working in corporate America 40 to 50 hours a week, that doesn't include your commute, that takes time too.
Right.
So to become a really good writer, I would definitely give up my corporate America job in order to be able to write more.
And that's the goal, right?
That's the goal.
So we need y'all to go buy at least 15 apiece.
Please. That would be great.
This has been an awesome interview today, you guys. And if you guys are just now catching the video, or if you guys have questions, make sure that you do contact us. And I'm going to give Meredith the opportunity to tell you where and when, how you can get in contact with her.
Great. Thank you, Delilah. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this interview and this exposure. So if you're not one of Delilah's clients, I recommend you get on board with that. But with respect to my book, A Cajun Journey, you can pre-order it at cmarshallturner.com. That's my author page. There is a pre-order button. And with that pre-order, you do get a deck of the free download for Cajun French cards. Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
Again, pre-order cmarshallturner.com. When it does come out in publication distribution channels, it'll also be available on Amazon.
And if you guys want a signed copy,
If you want a signed copy, inscribed, you will be able to tell me who you want it inscribed to. You can give me the message that you want as well. And again, you can only do that, however, through the cmarshallturner.com website, my author page, cmarshallturner.com.
right? And if you're also looking for her on your favorite social media site, it is under
For Facebook, it's cmarshallturner, and on Instagram, it's also cmarshallturner.
and we also have Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere else.
All cmarshallturner.
And then for those who are inquiring about a media kit, it will be on cmarshallturner.com. So yeah, I believe we covered everything there. Meredith, it was awesome. You guys, thank you. You all have a blessed night.
Thank you, Delilah.
No problem.
Good night, everybody.